Chris. And just for the record, again, my name is Adam Argo. I am in ODOT Statewide Transportation Planning Unit. And as principal planner, I suppose I'm the lead long-range planner for statewide planning. And thank you, Carol. As Chris mentioned, I've had the privilege of coming to OMSC before, previous occasions, while the process of updating the plan was still underway. And I believe in August, I was given the opportunity to do, as Lee Ming had alluded to, a encore of a presentation that Jonathan Slayson and I had delivered this past June at the TRB ITAP conference. And that was exciting in terms of talking about the real technical aspects of the scenario planning undergirding the process. But here we are. Now I get to speak, being on the other side of the wormhole, if you will, because if you would advance the slide, Carol, the Oregon Transportation Plan was adopted by the Oregon Transportation Commission in July of this year. So I do want to take a second and just offer again my gratitude for several members of folks on this meeting and on the OMSC who served as staff, as technical advisory staff, but also those here who were involved in the advisory process to move the project forward on policy development, also to vet where the technical and the qualitative aspects of the process really had to come together. And it just means a lot that those of you who know who you are were involved and committed and made the commitment to do that. Next slide, please. So I want to not take too much time as a remedial exercise, since I think the majority of you folks are pretty familiar with the main elements of the plan. But we do need to start on the vision aspect. The vision statement, just one sentence, supporting Oregonians, connecting people and goods to places. And look at these three things here: most climate friendly, equitable, and safe way. If you can push forward on the slide. And that is where our goals fit to meet the vision. And there are 6 goals. And I know we've reviewed those goals before. But Carol, if you can advance on to the right, you see those 3 elements of the vision are what we have in the plan instrumented as our priority lenses behind decision-making to inform the priorities in meeting the goals in the plan. And we'll get back, we're going to revisit that a little bit later in the presentation, but this is pretty important to kind of front with in going forward and talking about implementation of the OTP. Next slide, please. So again, this is a bit of a revisit, but in the OTP is a section that is a bit new as far as the development of statewide plans for ODOT. It's an element of a policy framework, so that behind the large suite of policies and strategies, which are found in Chapter 6 of the plan, it's understood that we're really seeking to have an outcome-driven plan that's about saving lives, centering equity, reducing GHG emissions, securing sustainable, reliable transportation funding, and I have a little bit to say about that, maintaining the existing system, completing critical connections, and enabling efficient movement of goods and services. This framework is to also really help bring the stated 6 foundational goals of the OTP to what we're talking about in making in the priorities in the plan. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, so in the OTP, for those of you who have taken the time to read it, and I greatly appreciate that, but I also would like to say we have an executive summary of the Oregon Transportation Plan that's available. I've actually have hard copies available on the table for those here in the meeting, but following the meeting, we can also provide a link. The thing about this executive summary, it's not designed to make the general public aware of what the OTP is. We believe we've done that throughout the 2.5 years of the update process. It's really oriented towards internal staff and transportation planning practitioners to understand how we're connecting vision, goals, policies to these top 10 implementing actions and the way we see it connecting to people in the respective realms of work as practitioners. So it's not that they're ranked, but it's certainly no accident that I would want to key on securing sustainable, resilient, and reliable transportation funding streams. I'm gonna have a little bit more to say about that, but the thing about that as a top implementing action in the Oregon Transportation Plan is how it has direct alignment with priorities that ODOT is putting forward in their next iteration of what's known as the Oregon Transportation Commission Strategic Action Plan, which is a more short-term element for ODOT's priorities, as well as what we're going to have to do in anticipation of what is expected in early 2025 to be a major reauthorization act to come out of the state legislature. So it's just something I want to key on right away, that as far as implementation goes, it's very intentional on my end to start thinking about the how and the who on implementation of these actions. And it really starts with the funding issue. And if those of you who have read the OTP or have been a part of the process know that we very intentionally frame the serious issues around funding. We are headed for a pretty bad future, a pretty tough cliff irrespective of the actions that we can do and do need to do. So I just want to kind of put that in high focus here. But we also try to connect, we really intentionally connected these actions to the priority lenses and the vision and in our policies and strategies. That includes the focus on reducing fatalities and serious injuries is really within the safe systems approach paradigm. If you all are familiar with that and follow FHWA guidance, we're embracing that and adopting that in this iteration of the OTP. Electrification of the system, of course, is an enormous lift that's going to be beyond just ODOT, but we certainly have a big role in that. I would say on life cycle of existing assets, I feel like those of you who do the frontline work down to project development and implementation probably have a lot of wisdom that I could graft on in trying to formulate a work plan approach on implementing the OTP. And on compact development and trip lengths, I would want to connect that to policy and strategies we put in the OTP to intentionally directly point to the blueprint for urban design, because those contexts of the land use surrounding particularly corridors and their scale of activity in those corridors is a real determinant of how we would think about implementing this action. So that one I would say is maybe not as short term as I could put some of the others in terms of where we're going to get to certain targets, objectives to it. It's a bit of a longer haul, but it's important that it's in there. Next slide. Can you? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. These are the other five. I would say another thing I want to point out is that we're not starting from zero. It's recognizing too what's already underway by the agency. Leveraging emerging data and technology. I think of our subcommittee on emerging tech here as a group that's already stood up and helped inform where we can go on implementing that action. Completing and maintain data and mapping. I just want to also point out that on the social equity indices front, we've been doing a lot of work, and that includes the social equity index map tool that the state stood up that is available is a part of that, but we also look to OMSC to continue with how we would implement that action. And of course, reducing GHG and passenger VMT per capita, which I'll have a little more to say about that, is certainly something we're going to be in step with the climate office. We're going to have to be in step with our MPO partners. We're really needing to also be in step with DLCD. So it's just, these may seem obvious, but what they do is they've really put forward the who I need to be involved both internally in the agency, who are partners to implementing these actions in the OTP, and on creating and practicing equitable processes. I do want to say we in ODOT need to strongly be aligned with ODOT's Office of Social Equity on successfully implementing that action. Next slide. So I did allude to the strategic action plan. It is ODOT's short-term priority actions. I would say at this time, it's not considered to be, say, the short-term implementing arm of the Oregon Transportation Plan. And it is separate, and it does have some elements that are a bit specific to ODOT that include workforce aspects, including our maintenance, but including DMV. But I would say we have overlap. There are those connecting elements. I alluded earlier to the fact that securing sustainable, reliable funding is certainly an action identified in the strategic action plan. And where you note up there, whereas the previous strategic action plan was designed as a 3-year, this next one, which is targeted to be approved by the Oregon Transportation Commission at the beginning of 2024, is really a 5-year plan. And there are, again, workforce, customer service oriented elements of it that we don't really address specifically in the OTP as to ODOT staffing issues. Next slide. Another aspect of implementing the OTP is certainly the major update that is very quickly now getting ready for kickoff of the Oregon Highway Plan. The objectives very much align with the OTP, and that if you're all familiar with the relationship of statewide plans, where you can consider the OTP the umbrella plan and the OHP as a topic plan in our modal and topic suite of modal and topic plans. But it certainly is pretty darn important that we note the connections. A lot of you in this group probably will have some connection and aspect of the update process to the OHP, of defining the state's highway system and informing the tactical level planning management decisions. We certainly need to tie to the OHP, but the OHP is going to have its own need for policies and update of policies and of implementing actions of getting to those issues at the corridor level, for instance. Next slide. And continuing on those objectives, the framework for prioritizing investments on the state highway system is a needed element of the OHP, where the OTP is a framework for this entire state as far as prioritizing investments. We also really need to get in the OHP, we need to get at a fine level of a framework for monitoring and reporting in the system. And yes, there will be an implementation component of the highway plan. Next slide. But there are other things that tie to OTP implementation. So I suppose you could say evangelizing the OTP I made note of the executive summary document. It is available on the main project website, but you can also contact me if you want a nice stitched hard copy of the 11-page document. We can think of it as a part of what Policy Data Analysis Division Administrator Amanda Peets wants to see as translation documents. It's really how to make the OTP real to people across the agency and with our partners. Next bullet. There are other statewide plan updates in motion. That includes an update to the Oregon Rail Plan. And there is a recently completed what's called a light update to the Oregon Freight Plan, but we know there'll be a major update in 4 years. That timing is very important considering we now have a newly adopted OTP. We will have a newly adopted OHP. So that's really going to drive some of the major elements of the freight plan that are going to be needed to be updated. Next. And I made allusion to this earlier. I can't say enough how critically important it's going to be of how the implementation work of the OTP gets in front of the 2025 legislative session. And that we expect a major transportation reauthorization to be taken up. If it doesn't happen in 2025, I suppose we are already of mind that it would be kicked to 2027. But I would certainly hope we are going to do what we need to do to help inform the governor's office, the Joint Committee on Transportation in the legislature on the needs and the critical priorities behind the investments we're seeking for meeting the goals of the OTP and looking out to a future of 2050. Which is the horizon year, as you know, for the OTP. Next slide. And bullet. Just want to note again, we have a lot of partner agency coordination that's important in terms of implementing the OTP. CFEC implementation, I actually tie that to where the MPOs are going on the RTP updates and to the many local jurisdictions that are going to be needing to update their transportation system plans in the next 5 years. It is an enormous list and it is a very heavy task that my unit has already taken a lot of upstream work to prepare for in sort of a work plan approach. But this also very much ties to how we get to successful implementation of the OTP. Next. There's also the development of our STIP for the 2730 cycle. As you all know, STIP being the state's capital improvement program, if you will. And again, PDAD Administrator Amanda Peets is helping lead the primary steering entity internally and she has directed the team to utilize our approach and framework in the OTP scenarios to build the business cases and the programmatic ask that we're going to have of the OTC to approve for the next STIP cycle. Next slide, next bullet. And there are other guidance documents that are important towards OTP implementation. That includes the Climate Office's Climate Adaptation and Resilience Roadmap and ODOT's broadband strategy. Those themselves really contain a number of recommended actions that I see as very much helping fill in the blanks for implementation of our top actions in the OTP. Next. Okay. So what I'm working on right now internally in the agency is both a framework to move on up my managerial chain all the way up to executive leadership of a framework for implementing the OTP that needs to be able to be activated as a work plan type approach. So these are the main elements I am trying to design and draw up for each of those top 10 implementing actions. It necessitates a crosswalk to the specific OTP policies and strategies. And again, I get to promote that the OTP executive summary provides you those crosswalks around those framework top priority actions. We need to identify the deliverables that are tied to those implementing actions and ranges to complete them. This probably doesn't look alien to a lot of you who have to do your own implementing work of your own long range and shorter range plans. Identifying leads and champions and external partners again is going to be critical. And assessing a level of readiness and a level of effort behind each action. I believe that looking at that, achieving a sustainable, reliable funding is probably the one that is going to maybe have, in a short term, the highest level of effort across the agency, needing to move the level of readiness the fastest. Next. There are going to be needed future legal policy changes or needed legislative actions to implement actions that would include, by the way, instituting the road user charge. Right now, RUC, as you all know, is mostly a piloting aspect for the state, but we really have to start addressing what it's going to take to realize the RUC as what is the key transitioning element from the gas tax. Identifying relevant key performance targets, measures, and applicable key performance measures. I'll have a little bit more to say about that. And identifying the means of monitoring progress to implementing actions, including assessment tools. These last two bullets, I think, are very germane to us in this group, and that I look to this group as my technical advisory resource and kind of my vetting body on how we're going to make this happen, as well as what I have to do internally on supporting my division and the agency. Next. So this is kind of straight out of the plan, but just getting back to those lenses. Since the vision statement has these three main lenses of making decisions, we also set key performance targets set out to the year 2050 as central objectives to be tracked, ensuring they're being integrated in decision-making and target setting in order to ensure sufficient progress is made. And these are going to take a lot. On safety, we're talking about a statewide Vision Zero target. On climate, the passenger VMT per capita reduction of 20%, and then GHG reduction of 77% is quite the calling. And on the equity front, I just want to note, we will update the OTP with specific targets by the year 2025. Right now, there's work afoot where we're trying to coordinate with the Office of Social Equity and ensure we're in step with them on helping their programmatic efforts, and as well as getting it basically approved across the agency. Next slide. And so here, this is an example of what's Appendix B in the full OTP document. For those who are in the meeting, I actually printed out some copies of that Appendix B, and I'm not showing the entirety of that in this presentation, but this is an example excerpt. And I just want to relate here, and again, this is from the OTP, that our indicators are a complement to existing federal state performance measures. They're not a replacement. They're not meant to be a duplication. Fed legislation, I think some of you are familiar with this work, what this is about requiring from FHWA, they set performance measures in safety, pavement, bridge condition, system performance. and ODOT monitors and reports on the performance measures for the state. So we adhere to a legislative approved set of performance measures, as well as our metrics adopted through the state transportation plans. And we have agency specific performance measures used for benchmarking. And that's another thing I don't have a very solid grasp on right now in terms of implementing the OTP, what specific benchmarks might come about in terms of relating to those three big key performance targets. But I think that we really have work that I can leverage what's going on within this committee and what's going on within the agency to get there. And just want to note we draw from metrics already documented, as I noted. We've set up this table so that it gives you well, here's the KPMs part. Here's what the state does. But it's really just a kind of example element. And it's not, to me, the complete blueprint for where our measures will be once we really set forth and get further on implementing the OTP. And I think, Carol, that is after this other example where we have a mobility target. I will end and just note that with this matrix table on development of measures, you see that under the Oregon performance measures right-hand side, it's really where we're pointing from the mobility OTP goal to the sustainable transportation strategy. The STS, our blueprint to get us there on meeting the GHG reduction targets. So I think this is it's an example of the basically intersectionality across the goals, and that the measures, even though they're trying to meet these specific goals and looking at VMT, looking at travel activity, we know we have to do this through the priority lens approach. And this is an aspect of doing that on the climate lens. So I think that's all I have. Thanks a lot. And I'm hopeful, Carol, there might be a little bit of time for questions. I don't know. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're right on schedule, but again, don't want to limit questions. So if there's any questions or comments.
Otherwise, I'm very easy to find. You know.
No, I think we can take it.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'll pause here again. Any questions or comments for Adam?
Well, that's okay, because I anticipate coming back to this. And hopefully we'll have a little more to say about where we went with some of these top 10 actions. And what if I am really able to develop this into a work plan, I would expect that I could share that, and we could get a little more drill down of what kind of performance metrics and monitoring would be behind some of this work that we could, as a team, collaborate on and keep moving with.
Oh, sounds good. I was gonna say another reaction was because that was again, finding information, a lot of things to coordinate too in the implementation of the OTP. So I actually appreciate you to walk through that.
Oh, sure.
Drawing the elements out.
There are a lot of parts. I just want to get it. I am in the midst of trying to get it into this kind of something I can hold on paper, if you will, that gives me some direction. And it's really starting to happen, but there are a lot of questions yet.
No, sounds good. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Appreciate the hard copies too.